When it comes to e-commerce or commerce generally, we're in really uncertain times at the moment. We've come off the back of a 2-year pandemic which saw e-commerce absolutely boom, and now things have just started to settle again, and some businesses are finding it really difficult to kick back into gear or to start growing again. And February of 2023 was a bit of a landmark moment. I've never seen so many businesses come to me for sale or in distress or just sounding me out. Hey Paul, what are you hearing out there? Just checking in. I started to get messages and emails, and that's always a bit of a telltale sign and acts as a bit of a barometer to what's going on out there. And obviously I have access to a lot of data from online retailers, and conversion rates were a little low across the board in February. Traffic was okay, but people weren't really purchasing as much as they usually did. So depending on which country you're in, there could be talk of a recession. Some countries are technically in a recession, others are on the door of a recession. It's a little uncertain out there. It's time to buckle down and work out how to not only survive, but to thrive in a recession as an online retailer. And even if we don't head to a recession, I'm going to give you some tips on how to run a good, lean, highly profitable business anyway. And is it possible to grow over the next 1 or 2 years? Absolutely. I've still got heaps of clients growing well, but it's the smart ones that are getting ahead now. And as they say, never waste a good crisis. So you could find that some of your competitors fall by the wayside, and it's time for the best businesses out there to stand up and really shine. One of my key phrases at the moment is operational excellence, because it's those businesses that are really going to get ahead. And many businesses who maybe did well during the pandemic, probably otherwise wouldn't have now come back a bit to the field. And I think there was a lot of bad habits learnt out there. Businesses started making money really quickly and probably weren't ready for it to subside. What I mean by that is it was easy to acquire customers, so businesses might have been spending sort of 25% on paid media and getting a really good return, and then upgrading to the bigger warehouse and the new office and buying the company car, and then things just settle a bit. And all of these expenses are quite high, and some of those businesses are being found out. A lot of them also weren't carrying a war chest, which is really important in any business, a war chest of cash to get you through those tough times. Some businesses are way too highly leveraged. As sales come in, they're just paying their bills and so on and so on. Or as sales are coming in, they're buying too much inventory and they're buying the wrong inventory. So demand planning has never been more important. Something for small businesses to remember is the grass is not always greener. A lot of these bigger businesses that you might have your eye on as being success stories are not making any money at all. I see a lot of them. You'll be surprised. So it's really important not to look over your shoulder, not to assume that because another business is doing it, you should do it as well. Find your own way to do it, and there's every chance you could become a better operator than some of these big players. And so do I think that e-commerce is going to continue to grow? Well, it is. In most countries, it's about 20 to 22% of total retail spend. That's pretty consistent across Europe and Australia and New Zealand and the US, UK. So I do think it's going to keep growing. And where do I think it'll end? Well, I don't think it'll end. I think it'll keep growing for quite some time. It's still very early days when you think about it. 20% of total retail, that's nothing. That's 1/5 of total retail. And we think everything is online now. Well, it's not. The reality is, and I say this all the time, you could be watching this video in 2023, 24, 25. You could still start, and in 20 or 30 years, you could absolutely still be considered an early adopter or pioneer of e-commerce. And that's why I love it so much. So I think in the next decade, e-commerce is going to reach 50-50 with traditional retail. So it'll be parity. I think brick and mortar shopping centers and so on will always have a place. It's fun to go out and take the family and have a bit of an experience. But absolutely, I think that e-commerce is going to reach 50-50. Why do I think that? It's moving so fast. Companies like Shopify are making things easier for merchants, easier for customers. And over the last decade, e-commerce has improved dramatically. I remember my first website in 2007 on Magento. It was terrible. I could spin up a website that's 5 times better than that in 24 hours using Shopify, following my book Shopify for Dummies, of course. And why I think it'll also reach 50-50 with traditional retail is it's just common sense. We think we're pretty good online shoppers, and I order something probably every week or every second week, but I've only got to look at one of my 3 daughters. she's 4 years old, and my 2-year-old, they know how to use an iPad. Now they're better on technology than I am. So that's common sense. As we all get older and the younger generation comes through, they're just going to be way more digitally savvy than we are. So it just makes total sense that they're already online. Of course they're going to shop online in greater numbers as we get phased out through evolution. So I think the evolution of online retail is only just beginning, and there's massive opportunity, which is exactly why I wrote my books, is exactly why I developed my course at learnecommerce.com.au. And I'm really excited about what the next 5 or so years holds. So I've been thinking about 10 top tips for surviving a recession in e-commerce. And even if there's not a recession coming, these are just good practical tips to build a good, lean, profitable e-commerce business. So let's get into it. Tip 1, have a working budget that's accurate. Now, most businesses have a budget, I hope. If you don't, you absolutely need one, because so many metrics in e-commerce are related to planned sales. So as an example, open to buy, or OTB, which is a metric that determines how much stock you need to buy. And yes, there is a specific formula for that. There's a specific amount of inventory that a business needs. But your open to buy is dictated by your planned sales. So if I'm planning to do $500,000 in sales next month, I've got to buy enough inventory at cost to cover that $500,000 in sales on top of what I've already got. And then when that $500,000 is depleted, I've got to buy again for the next month. But if I don't know how much I'm going to make in sales, how can I possibly get my inventory number right? And that's one of the key reasons, maybe the number one reason I see businesses fail, is that they double down on inventory that they don't need. Time and time again, I speak to business owners who tell me they're going to do $2 million, $3 million, $4 million next month. And then the month comes and they've done $1 million. And they just move on as if nothing's happened. But we've got to hold ourselves accountable to the numbers. The best way to grow an online business in terms of profitability is to start scrutinizing your numbers, analyze them, understand them, and get into them every single day. Not just every month, every day you should be in your numbers. A working budget is an accurate budget. If I plan to make, let's say, $100,000 in sales this month, I need to get to the end of the month and compare what I actually did, my actuals, to my budget. And if you're more than 4 or 5% off your actuals to your budget, in my opinion, you've got to be nailing that. The same goes for your gross margin. If you're anticipating a gross margin of 50 and it comes in at 47, you need to be digging into why. You really should be hitting your gross margins to the T, or maximum 1, maybe 2% off. The third metric you need to be looking at is your OPEX. I get maybe more excited when I see a business spending $500,000 or $600,000 a month, and I help them with their budget, and it gets down to within $5,000 accurate for the month. That gets me really happy, and I get a big grin on my face, because it's that feeling of control. A company that's hitting its working budget is in control, and when you're in control of your numbers, you can make decisions to scale. I can't make any decisions to scale if I don't know the numbers. If I don't believe in the numbers, I can't give good advice. There's a lot of clarity in the numbers, and e-commerce owners need to get into their profit and loss statements. They need to understand their numbers. Number 2 is a tip for the newbies out there who maybe have started a side hustle, or they're thinking about it. And that's why I wrote my books and did my courses, because so many people come to me with ideas. And honestly, sometimes my job is to tell them that's not a great idea, because my job, my mission, is to improve the lives of the business owners that I work with. And that starts with my first meeting. The best piece of advice that I could give a business owner is don't launch, you're not ready, and that saves them money. Then I've done my job, because I'm trying to make and save business owners money. In that vein, I'm a little bit old school, but I think that if you're starting a side hustle and you've got a 9-to-5 job that pays you well and you're enjoying it, keep it. Do the hard work at night, get up early, treat it as a side hustle until it can afford to pay you. Don't push it. Don't quit a good paying job and put unnecessary pressure on your online business. What you should be doing is getting paid, taking that pressure off yourself and your family, and putting all of the money back into your online business for at least a year. And you should be building out your product range. You might have started small, but you're adding breadth to your product range, not depth. I'm a little worried about depth. That gets you into trouble, buying above what you should be buying, but adding product to your shelves is one of the best ways that you can grow a business. It's no different to walking into your favorite clothing store. If you see nothing on the shelves or nothing new on the shelves for a month, you'll lose interest, you'll go in, you won't buy when you go back. It's the same in e-commerce. If people see your store and it's got busy virtual shelves, and there's a big selection, they'll buy and then they'll come back. But if they see a few things they like, they might buy, they might not. Then a month later, they come back and they see the same things, they won't come back. You'll have a retention problem. So product is where it all starts. And so try and save that money initially and build out your product range until it's got a good offering. Now, point 3 for surviving and thriving in a recession, if you're an online retailer, is to hold enough cash. Way too many businesses out there running out of cash. Way too many businesses out there spending recklessly on product and marketing. So, how much is enough cash? Another common question. In my experience, I find that 10 weeks is the right amount of free cash, what I call free cash. So here's my definition of free cash. Imagine, God forbid, another global pandemic comes and we're all locked up and logistics companies freeze and there's no online sales. And we always have to plan for the worst. We have to plan for a stress test, a crisis. You want to be able to pay your staff, pay your bills, pay your rent for 10 weeks with absolutely zero income. That means 10 weeks worth of your weekly expenses minus your marketing, because if there's no sales coming in, we don't need marketing. Obviously no freight, but that sits in cost of sales. So I'm talking about your fixed costs. If I spend $20,000 a week on my expenses as an online business, I need to hold 20,000 times 10 weeks. So that's 200,000. That should be my float in my virtual cash register. Anything over 200,000, I might pull that out or sit it in an interest-bearing account or whatever. That could be my dividends. But I need to be holding that 10 weeks to give me safety and comfort. So remember, cash is king or queen, and you should try and aim for 10 weeks free cash at all times as part of your war chest. Now, tip 4 is one that I talk about a lot, and that is don't hold too much inventory. Now, that can be difficult, particularly when you're dealing with offshore manufacturers who have particularly high minimum quantities. But let me tell you something, I've been importing for more than 15 years. Everything's negotiable. I would rather keep my orders low and even lose a few points on my profit margins on the product instead of over ordering, because what will happen is if I over order, say I buy 200 units of this t-shirt, but in 3 months I really can only sell 50, then I should have ordered 50, because what's going to happen is it might have cost me $5,000 to place this purchase order, and 3 months comes and goes and I've made say $3,000 back. I haven't even paid back the outlay on the purchase order. Now, I really should be aiming to pay that back in the first 4 weeks, and then week 5, 6, 7 onwards to 12 is about profit and getting ahead. But if I'm not even paying this order back for 3, 4, 5 months, and then my profit kicks in, well, I'm still chasing the money on this order while I'm going into production for the next order. So I haven't got my money back, but I'm going into production for the next one, and then the next one, and the next one, and you start to really feel the pressure of this cash negative cycle. Whereas if I buy 50 of these t-shirts and they sell out in 10 weeks instead of 12, and I've ordered my second batch, but they haven't arrived yet, that's fine. I'll throw up the sold out badge. I'll drive a bit of hype around that. I've made all my money back plus profit. So my cash position is far better than when I bought 200 of the shirts. I'll throw up the sold out sign, I'll hype it up, and when the next batch comes, I'll do a big email blast and I'll shout it from the rooftops. I'd absolutely much rather be sold out of a product and generate some hype than have the product sitting on my shelves for 6 months, 12 months, or even worse, a year and a half to 2 years. It also doesn't look great having the same stock sitting on the website, potentially on sale for long periods of time. We want to keep our inventory turning over 3 or 4 times a year. So as a rough rule, I think aim for no more than 12 weeks of cover if you're an importer of product. If you're manufacturing locally and you can get your product turned around in 2 weeks, then you should be aiming for 4 to 6 weeks cover, no more than that. So the whole idea is to hold as little inventory as you can, but not sell out, so that as you're about to sell out, the next shipment is just landing, just in time. It's not easy. That's called demand planning, but it's a great skill to brush up on. Tip 5 is to keep an eye on your OPEX and make sure that you're running it at less than 30%. So in a recession, we've got to tighten our belts, and tightening our belts in e-commerce means spending less than 30% on your operating expenses. I think that's essential. If I look at a business and I see that it's spending over 50% of its revenue back into operating expenses, there's alarm bells there for me. And typically it means they're probably spending too much on paid media, which is another issue in itself. Many of my clients spend less than 30%. Again, coming back to my 50, 30, 20 rule, 30% is OPEX. That should take a lot of pressure off your sales. If you're spending huge amounts on your operating expenses, there's a lot of pressure to hit big sales numbers just to cover your costs and break even. And then you become in a cycle where you have to hit a certain amount each month. And of course, when you're not hitting that amount, you go on sale, and that damages the brand. We don't want to hit our targets by discounting. So take pressure off your top line targets by reducing your operating expenses. And 30% is a very practical and reasonable amount to aim for. So in a recession or leading into a recession, or even not, a good, lean, highly profitable online retailer absolutely should be spending no more than 30% on their operating expenses. Tip 6, back to my 50, 30, 20 rule. Keep your gross margins high. I think gross margin is possibly the most important metric in e-commerce. My 50, 30, 20 rule states that online retailers need to be aiming for more than 50% gross profit. Again, what's gross profit? A little bit different to the product profit. So I might have a product that has a 70% intake margin. By the time I add my freight to get my orders to my customers, or my packaging that it comes in, or my merchant fees, or my afterpay fees and things like that, my cost of sales, I should be left with a 50% gross profit margin. That's the first thing I look at when I'm looking at a new business. I have a look at their gross margins. If they're north of 50, I'm happy. If they're sub 50, I'm a bit nervous. I think, okay, there's work to be done here. How can you keep your gross profit margins high? Obviously, you've got to negotiate well with your manufacturers, but we all know there's not a whole lot of wiggle room there. The reality is you need to be sea freighting if you're an importer. If you're air freighting and you're doing, let's say, a pair of shoes or a jacket, and you're importing from Asia, from China, you could be paying up to $40, $45 per pair of shoes or per jacket in freight. And if you don't have clarity over your numbers, you'll miss that. That's why it's important to have good bookkeeping, run a tight zero file, MYOB file, or a great inventory management system, or at least have your cost prices entered in Shopify or whichever platform that you're using. So it's important to sea freight. Whenever I'm looking at ways to make a company more profitable, these are the things I'm looking at. I'm not really looking at sales. I am looking at conversion rate and so on. But the low-hanging fruit is in things like logistics. Can we move you all to sea freight? Because if you move from air freight to sea freight, you could absolutely be looking at a 5% increase in your gross profit margins, which is enormous. There's almost nothing that can give you that sort of increase. So the good news is there's only two ways to increase your gross profit margins. One is to raise prices, and usually that's not very easy to do. Although you can do it, you could look at your grade A product, your top selling product that accounts for 80% of your total revenue, and maybe you could shift all of that up 2 or 3%. Maybe there's some items that could go up 5%. Again, it's a game of inches. It's about the 1% here, there, everywhere. They all add up. If we can get 1 or 2% on our prices going up, and then say 5% on our freight coming down or moving to sea freight, that's 7% added to our gross profit margin, which is enormous. These are the ways that clever retailers, clever online retailers are getting ahead. The lazy online retailers are running sales and just looking at sales and more customers. The smart ones are getting into their numbers and dissecting them. So for me, air freight is a big no. You need to get ahead of the game. You need to sea freight, because the rude shock you'll get when you look at how much air freight is adding to your unit costs, the saving that you can make by just moving to sea freight, it's phenomenal. And again, people say, oh yeah, but it takes 4 weeks to get it in by sea as opposed to a week by air or 4 days by air. Yeah, sure. But you shouldn't be in that position where you're late. If you're in that position where you're late, again, you're not forecasting well. You're not budgeting well. So a good demand planning means that your sea freight should be just rolling in when your last order is coming, when your last stock is depleting, roughly. So what I'm saying there is there's no real cost to sea freight in terms of lost sales, because you should have your inventory in anyway. We're not saying sell out of your inventory and then ring your supplier and say, hey, I need more stock. You should be, in my opinion, doing replenishment checks every Monday so that we're not actually running out of stock. Another objection that I've heard for people wanting to move to sea freight is to say, yeah, but if we've sold out, it's going to take 3 or 4 weeks. Well, don't sell out. Do your replenishment properly. If you're selling out of your inventory consistently, there's something wrong. Your forecasting, again, back to my budgeting, is out. It's wrong. So don't air freight to cover up another problem. Fix the problem. The problem is not sea versus air in that instance. The problem is that you're not forecasting well. You don't know how much stock you need for 3 months. And the question is this: if I'm ordering enough stock for 3 months of this t-shirt, at a basic level, what am I asking myself? How many of these a day will I sell for 90 days? And that's my answer. And you have to be really honest with yourself. I remember in my first online business, I owned a shoe company. I wasn't honest with myself. I would order these shoes and I'd think, yep, they're the winner. I'm going to get 500 of them. And I just didn't break it down. And then I'd sell 80 and I'd think, wow, if I'd ordered 100, that would have been fine. But I ordered 500 and I've only sold 80. They got to go on sale. Damage to the brand. My eyes were bigger than my stomach. Again, sometimes you need that third party to come in and say, Paul, are you really going to sell 500 or are you going to sell one a day? One a day is fine. Just get your numbers right. So you then don't get left in a hole where you have to air freight. And nobody will ever convince me that paying a premium for air freight that eats into your margins is a good business decision. Air freighting is for lazy online retailers. Sea freighting is for people that get ahead. Tip 7, attack your grade C inventory. So for those Shopify merchants out there, and you might know I love Shopify. I'm platform agnostic, but I absolutely love Shopify because I've seen so many millionaires come to me with nothing at the start, and then in a year or two, they're just flying. And it's such a rewarding platform, and basically using Shopify, you should be able to scale to $100,000 a month solo with no help. And I see that all the time. And that's what I teach in my courses. One of my favorite reports in Shopify is the ABC analysis, which is based on the Pareto principle that 80% of something comes from 20% of something else. In this instance, 80% of revenue typically comes from 20% of product. Now, that's not a hard and fast rule, but it is often the case. And that's why Shopify have it in their inventory reporting, because it's often the case. And it's a great benchmark. So grade A inventory accounts for 80% of your revenue. So it's your good stuff. You never ever want to sell out of grade A inventory. You need to be on it. Grade B, that can come and go. That accounts for 15% of your revenue. So it's okay, but it's not quite grade A. Grade A is core. For me, grade B and C can fall by the wayside, and I just keep building my grade A inventory, my core range, and I add to that every season. So grade B is 15% of your revenue, and grade C is a measly 5%. Grade C gives me the heebie-jeebies. When I run that report in a client, that's one of the health checks that I'm looking for. If I see a massive amount of grade C inventory and the business is sitting on a year's worth of inventory cover, the good news is I know exactly what I'm going to say to that business. Go on sale, clear your grade C inventory. What about damage to the brand? They'll say, well, I'm asking you to clear your grade C inventory, which is your bad inventory. Leave your grade A, leave your grade B. Protect that. Protect the brand. But your grade C has been sitting there probably for a long time. Generally, most of your inventory is made up of grade C inventory. And think about it this way. You could burn all of your grade C inventory in a pile right now, and you'll only lose 5% of your total revenue each day. So if I said to you, hey, I'll buy all of your grade C inventory bracket cost, you should say yes. You should just be getting rid of that grade C inventory, bringing the cash back in and going and buying more inventory. So it's inevitable that you'll have grade C inventory. That doesn't mean you're doing a bad job, but that's the stuff you attack through sale. So when you're a little low on cash, when you're a little high on inventory cover, ABC analysis, go to your grade C inventory and attack it. Get rid of it. Be ruthless. A sale should be a sale. Price it to clear. Tip 8 for surviving and thriving in e-commerce in a recession or a would-be recession. And this is another tip that, is certainly not just for a recession, but a good business tip. You should be aiming for more than 50% of your website traffic to be coming from organic sources. So what do I mean by that? Organic sources in this instance means free traffic. I'm talking about organic search engine rankings, SEO. I'm talking about organic social media strategies. I'm talking about referrals. I'm talking about email marketing, even though there's a small fee associated. I'm basically saying anything that's not Facebook, TikTok, and Google ads. So those three things play a part. in any e-commerce business. But organic traffic is where it's at. Organic traffic is a sign of a smart operator, a good brand, and a strong product. We don't want to have to pay our way to success because we're talking about how to survive in a recession. Is the way to survive in a recession to throw more money into paid media or less? Don't be in a position where all of your revenue is coming from paid media, because when money gets tight and you have to dial that spend down, your revenue comes straight back down, and then you can't cover your fixed costs. So you have to spend more, knowing it's inefficient, to get your revenue back up. It becomes a very vicious cycle, and one that I see all the time. So how to check? Go into Google Analytics, check your traffic by sources, and essentially you just want to see that at least 50% of your traffic and your revenue ideally is coming from sources other than ads, other than Facebook, Google ads. If more than 50% of your revenue is coming from paid ads, there's a good chance that you're having to pay for almost every sale you get. So you probably have low retention. And retention, repeat purchase rate, think of that as compounding revenue, because it's not free, but often customers come back through organic channels. So you can acquire customers and they pay you back over time, and that they compound and they help you scale and grow quickly. But if they're not coming back and you're just having to acquire a new customer every time through Facebook or Google ads, that's a very slippery slope. So how do you focus on organic traffic? Well, you get together with your colleagues and you brainstorm. Look at examples of how other businesses are doing it. You think about your product. Is your product newsworthy? And don't forget, when it comes to product, you don't need to change the world. We don't all need to be building electric cars and rockets to the moon, but we do want our product to be a game changer in a small way. So when it can either be a massive change to someone's life, solving a huge problem, or it could be solving a small problem for many, many, many people every day. But if our product is solving a problem, that product gets people talking and it creates brand interest. Our job as brand owners is to do interesting things with our brand. And it's no coincidence that some of the biggest brands in the world are the cool stories. Rarely do you see a business like a Gymshark where Ben Francis will come out and say, yeah, we dominated the world through Facebook ads. No, he built a community. He's built a community of outside of the product. And so that's what the good businesses do. They build something magical. They build community. So I'm not saying it's an easy job, but it's one you need to start thinking about. Ease your dependence on paid media so that if a recession does occur, that's okay. We're not spending a whole lot on paid media anyway. Really, you want to be spending no more than 15 to 20% of your revenue back into paid media. So get to focusing on your organic traffic sources. Tip 9 for surviving and thriving in a recession comes back to margin a little bit. And when you're procuring products, go for high margin products. So price your products for a 70% intake margin. And here's how to do that. Take your landed cost price, so the cost of your product, add freight, and divide it by 0.3. 0.3 is 30%, which is your cost of goods sold when you're looking to obtain a margin of 70%. So take your landed cost, divide it by 0.3, and that's your recommended retail price, X tax. So add tax onto that if you're required to do so. That gives you a 70% margin. Starting with a great margin on products is going to set you up for success. It's going to give you that breathing room during a recession. But when you're being squeezed on margin from the start and then the market contracts a little bit and customers aren't buying like they were, you have no wiggle room. So price your products for a 70% margin. My 10th and final tip to building a recession-proof online business is not to look over your shoulder at what everybody else is doing. I'm in a fortunate position where I get exposure to a lot of online businesses. And if I had $1 for every time I heard a business say, oh, but I saw such and such doing it this way, or running ads this way, or doing this, or going overseas, I'd be a very rich man. Let me tell you, a lot of these big businesses that you see are making no money. I see it all the time. And a lot of these businesses that you've never heard of, building empires in the dark, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, $10 million, 30% net profit, living like kings and queens. And I know who I'd rather be. So this is a bit of a tip, for those that are sort of thinking about their own business and maybe they're judging themselves harshly. Let me tell you, if you're making a profit in e-commerce, you're doing well, because the majority of online businesses fail. I believe that revenue for vanity, profit for sanity. I specialize in building highly profitable cash generating businesses, but don't be fooled into seeing what other people are doing and thinking they're succeeding. The grass is not always greener, and there's every chance that you're doing better than that company that you think is absolutely killing it. Believe me, if these walls could talk, I would love to tell you all of the stories of these big businesses who are just getting it wrong. You've got to run your own race. When they zig, you should zag, and that's how I feel about e-commerce. You can write the rules. It's all about testing and learning. I only speak from experience. I don't speak about what I've read. I speak about what I know has worked or not worked, and then I tell my clients and I tell you here, hey, this is what'll work because I've seen it work. Trust your instinct, trust your data, trust your customers, test, repeat. Do not get lured into this trap of paying tens of thousands of dollars a month on sophisticated augmented reality or the newest technologies when you don't even have good email flows. E-commerce is a very, very simple game. We are aiming to sell lots and lots of product and lots of good feelings. It's simple. So the final tip that I want to leave you with is to run your own race. Don't look over your shoulder. Put your head down. Follow this advice that I'm giving you. Follow the parameters that I give you. Reach out if you've got any questions. Play it smart. If you can clearly answer this question, what problem does my product solve? And you have that genuine aha moment, that's a significant step. So they're my top 10 tips for surviving and thriving in a recession. I want to see all of you guys building your stores and absolutely dominating 2023 and coming out 2024 on top. I want to hear from you guys. Comment, drop me a line, follow me on socials at Paul Waddy E-Commerce. I'm happy to clarify anything I've spoken about here, because remember, my mission is to improve the lives of business owners that I work with using e-commerce as their vehicle, and I'm passionate about that. So I hope this has helped. Get out there, sell more product, and have fun doing it.